What if I told you that sadness isn't always healing? That sometimes it becomes a hiding place, not because we want to suffer, but because we're terrified of living without the wound that gave us identity. I remember lying in bed for 3 days straight after my first heartbreak. Sunlight sneaking through the curtains, the world moving on outside, and me paralyzed. Not physically, but emotionally. I was cemented in place. My body was functioning. I could breathe. My legs worked. My phone was fully charged. I could have called someone, ordered food, stepped out. But I didn't. I stayed there, curled into myself, whispering silent mantras of shame. Why wasn't I enough? And what did I do wrong? But here's the truth I couldn't see then. I chose to stay in that sadness, not consciously, not dramatically. And I also chose to stay in that sadness, not consciously, not dramatic. It was quiet, like a decision made in my bones. Because the sadness, as brutal as it was, felt safer than facing what might come next. See, hope is dangerous. Hope demands risk. If I let go of the grief, if I got up and washed my hair and walked outside, I'd be stepping into uncertainty again. I'd be vulnerable to more rejection, more hurt, more not enoughness. But sadness was predictable, more aligned with my axiom: no hurt, no gain, sadness. Sadness was predictable. It was familiar. It became a room I knew how to live in, the kind of pain that didn't ask anything of me. And I see this in so many people. We think sadness is the storm, but sometimes it becomes the shelter, a broken kind of comfort. Because when life feels too big, too fast, too cruel, sadness can be the place we crawl into, where we're not expected to smile or try or explain ourselves. But what begins as a necessary pause slowly becomes a prison with invisible walls. Psychologists call this learned helplessness. It's when you've been knocked down enough times that your brain stops believing you can stand up, even when the cage door is wide open. You could walk out, but your nervous system says, why bother? The world will hurt again. So we shrink, we stay in the bed, we cancel plans, we ghost the people who love us. We stop dreaming because dreaming makes the sadness feel even heavier. And then something really cruel happens. We start to confuse our sadness with our identity. Not just I feel broken, but I am broken. But the truth is, sadness can speak in a voice that sounds eerily like your own, but it's not always telling the truth. It tells you that you're safest in the dark. It tells you not to trust the light. It says, stay here, stay small, stay numb. And you start believing it, because when sadness has been your home for a long time, joy feels like trespassing. But I need you to hear this. You are allowed to leave the room. You are allowed to stand up, even if you wobble, even if your hands shake and your voice cracks, even if the sadness yells at you on your way out. You don't have to feel ready to move. You just have to move. Because readiness doesn't come first. Action comes first, then belief, then healing. The cage was never locked, but the longer you sit in it, the more it feels like home. And maybe today, the bravest thing you can do is reach for the handle. Not to run, not to escape, but to remember. There's a whole life outside this sadness, and it's okay if you're not okay yet. But you were not made to live in the waiting room of your own healing. I once sat across from a woman during a session, late 30s, wildly intelligent, successful by all the world's standards, and she said something I'll never forget. Her voice cracked as she looked down and whispered, "If I stop being the broken girl, who am I?" It landed like a punch to the gut, because I knew what she meant. I knew there comes a point in our grief, our sadness, our trauma, where the wound doesn't just live inside us anymore. It starts to define us. It becomes how we introduce ourselves to the world, maybe not out loud, but in the way we hold our posture, the way we flinch at joy, the way we explain why we don't get close to people anymore. I don't do vulnerability. I just don't trust people. I've been hurt too much. I'm fine on my own. At first, those statements are defenses, protective scaffolding. But over time, we start building a life on top of them. That heartbreak, it becomes a blueprint for every relationship. That betrayal, it becomes the lens we use to see everyone else. That parent who couldn't love us, right? It becomes the silent comparison we measure ourselves against forever. We don't realize we're doing it, but we start writing the story of who we are based on what hurt us. And soon, our pain is not something we went through, it's something we've become. There's a term in psychology for this. It's called enmeshment with the wound. It's when the story of your suffering becomes so entangled with your sense of self that letting go of the pain feels like erasing who you are. We don't want the sadness, but we cling to the identity it gave us. Because without it, we feel exposed, naked, undefined. And that's terrifying. If I'm not the girl who was cheated on, who am I? If I'm not the guy whose dad walked out, what's left? If I'm not the survivor, the struggler, the one who got through it, then who am I really? Here's the soul-wrenching truth. We often fear healing more than we fear pain, because healing demands we create a self that isn't based on survival. It demands we get curious about who we are without the narrative of hurt. And that takes a kind of bravery most people aren't talking about. It's not just about moving on. It's about rebuilding an identity from scratch, one that isn't rooted in being a victim or a fighter or someone who always has to prove they're okay. Sometimes sadness gives us a label that we carry like a badge. We wear it because it explains us, because people understand us better when they know we've suffered. And let's be honest, there's comfort in being the one who's been through hell and survived, but you are allowed to lay that badge down. You are allowed to be someone beyond the pain. You are allowed to grow past the version of yourself that sadness built. Because here's the truth that feels both terrifying and liberating. You are not your story. You are the storyteller. You can decide when to turn the page. You can write yourself out of the wound and into the wild unknown of healing. And yes, that will mean letting go of the identity you wore like armor. But what waits on the other side is not the erasure of who you are, it's the discovery of who you've always been beneath the hurt. And that version of you, they are not broken. They are not lost. They are not defined by what happened, they are becoming. And that's where freedom begins. There was a point in my life where I couldn't even cry anymore. And that scared me more than the tears ever did. I had gone through something that shattered me, something that should have broken me open, but instead, it shut me down completely. I wasn't weeping, I wasn't raging, I wasn't even thinking that much. I was just there, walking through my days like a foggy version of myself. I answered messages, I showed up to work, I nodded at conversations, but inside, it was just silence. Not peace, not stillness, silence, the kind that echoes back at you when you try to feel something, and nothing comes. And I see this in people all the time. When I ask, "How are you doing?" they don't say, "I'm sad." They say, "I'm tired," or "I don't know," or "I feel nothing." And here's what's really happening underneath. Numbness is the nervous system's last line of defense when your heart has been pushed past its capacity to hold pain, when sadness has overstayed its welcome, and grief hasn't found a place to land. Your body steps in and says, enough. It shuts down to survive. It numbs the emotional volume so you can keep moving through the day without falling apart. But here's the cost. When we numb pain, we also numb joy. When we silence grief, we muffle wonder. When we stop feeling the hard things, we lose access to all the things. And this numbness, this emotional disconnection, it doesn't feel like pain at first. It feels like functionality. It feels like control. You tell yourself, at least I'm not crying in the shower anymore. At least I'm not overwhelmed. But the trade-off is so deep. Because the truth is, numbness is lonely. So lonely. You're still here, still breathing, still showing up, but no one can reach you. Not because they don't love you, but because you've built a wall so high and so thick that even you don't remember what it feels like to be touched by emotion. You don't get excited about anything anymore. You don't laugh the same way. You don't feel fully alive. You just exist. And maybe you've convinced yourself that's better than breaking, that staying numb is better than reopening the wound. But here's the thing no one tells you. Numbness is grief with nowhere to go. It's pain trapped in the body, waiting for permission to be seen, felt, heard. It's the part of you that's still hoping someone will notice you're not okay, without you having to say it. But the exit out of numbness doesn't come through time. It comes through truth. You don't have to rip yourself open all at once, but maybe, just maybe, you can let yourself feel one thing: anger, sadness, longing, regret, anything. Maybe you can sit with one memory without judging yourself for how much it still hurts. Maybe you can listen to one song that breaks you open and let the tears come. Maybe you can look in the mirror and say, I miss who I was, but I'm still here. Because feeling again isn't weakness. It's a return to life. The goal isn't to be fixed. The goal is to be real. And real people cry. Real people get angry. Real people get overwhelmed and uncertain and scared. But they also fall in love. They laugh so hard they snort. They find meaning in small things again. Sunsets, deep conversations, coffee on a rainy day. So if you're numb right now, this is not your ending. This is the pause before the thaw. This is the silence before your soul says, okay, let's begin again. And when you do, when you finally feel again, it won't break you. It will remind you that you're still alive, still healing, still you. I remember sitting across from a friend one evening, staring at my coffee cup like it held all the answers I didn't have the courage to say out loud. I had been going through something big, something quietly devastating, and I was wearing the mask I'd worn 100 times before. The I'm good, really mask. The I can handle this on my own mask. But something cracked in me that night. Not in a dramatic way. It wasn't a meltdown. It was more like a quiet surrender. I looked up and said, I don't know how to ask for help without feeling like I'm a burden. And she didn't flinch. She didn't rush to fix it. She just looked at me, eyes soft, heart open, and said, I've been waiting for you to let me love you. I felt everything I'd been holding in for months rise to the surface like a flood. Not because I'd been alone, but because I'd convinced myself I had to be. That moment still lives in me because it shattered a belief I didn't even realize I'd built my life around. The belief that my pain makes me unlovable. that if I really showed people what was underneath my strength, they'd walk away. That vulnerability equals weakness. And the truth is, I'm not alone in that. We live in a culture that worships independence. We're taught that self-sufficiency is a virtue, that needing someone means we're failing at being enough on our own. So we wear our silence like a badge. We say, I'm fine, when we're bleeding. We keep our suffering quiet because the world claps louder for resilience than it does for raw honesty. But what happens when everyone is suffering quietly? What happens when sadness becomes a private ritual? Something we go through behind closed doors, in the dark, unseen, untouched. We create a world full of people who are drowning, within arm's reach of each other. Lonely in crowds, surrounded but not held. And that loneliness, that deep isolation, it doesn't just break our hearts, it literally rewires our brains. Neuroscience shows us that connection isn't just emotional comfort, it's a biological necessity. We are wired for belonging. Our nervous systems regulate through touch, through eye contact, through being witnessed. When we're not seen, when we carry grief in silence, we start to disappear even from ourselves. But here's the paradox. The very thing we need to heal is the thing we're most afraid to ask for: presence. Not advice, not solutions, just someone to sit beside us and say, I see you. You're not too much. You're not a burden. I'm here. But most of us don't give others that chance. We rehearse conversations in our head instead of having them. We scroll instead of reaching out. We wait for someone else to break the silence first. Because silence feels safer than rejection, and sadness feels more manageable when we don't have to explain it. But let me tell you something that might change your life. Letting someone in isn't weakness. It's how we remember we're human. We don't heal in isolation. We survive there, maybe. But healing happens in the presence of love. Even if it's messy. Even if you cry the whole time and say all the wrong things. Even if you tremble when you say, I'm not okay. That's where the real work begins. And I know it's hard. I know there are people who didn't show up for you the way they should have. I know some of you asked for help and were met with silence, or shame, or worse, disbelief. But don't let those moments convince you that you are unworthy of connection. Don't let the failures of others build a wall between you and the support that still exists in this world. Because there are people who will sit in the dark with you, who won't flinch at your story, who will look you in the eye and say, you don't have to carry this alone anymore. And maybe today, all you can do is whisper one vulnerable truth. Maybe all you can manage is to send a message that says, can we talk? Maybe you show up not with a perfect explanation, but with your full, trembling self. That's enough. That's how the silence breaks. That's how sadness loosens its grip, not with noise, but with connection, with one honest moment between two human hearts that says, I see you, I'm still here, and you don't have to do this alone anymore. A woman once sat across from me, her hands gripping a cup of tea that had gone cold long ago. She looked exhausted, not just physically, but soul deep. You could tell she had been surviving for a long time. She didn't cry. She didn't rage. She just said, I want to want joy again. But I'm scared it won't last. That sentence, I want to want joy again, stayed with me, because that's the quiet truth so many people carry. They're not afraid of sadness. They've made peace with sadness. It's familiar, predictable. But joy feels dangerous. Joy is unpredictable. Joy means you're open again. And being open means you can be hurt again. I've felt it in my own body. The moment you let yourself smile again after a season of pain, and you immediately flinch, waiting for the blow. Like the happiness is too good, like it has an expiration date. This is what we call foreboding joy. It's a term in psychology that describes how we protect ourselves from disappointment by refusing to fully feel happiness. We sabotage our own light before life can take it from us. We tell ourselves, don't get too excited, don't let your guard down, something bad always happens. And so we half live. We numb the highs so the lows won't destroy us. We play small, not because we can't dream, but because we're afraid of what it will cost to believe again. But here's the thing no one talks about. When we avoid pain, we also avoid healing. And healing, real healing, isn't just about stopping the hurt. It's about reclaiming life. Not the life you had before everything fell apart, but the life that's still possible after. And that takes courage. Not loud, movie scene courage, quiet courage. The kind that wakes up on a Tuesday morning, brushes your teeth, and says, okay, I'm still here, let's try again. It's making dinner, making plans, making space for hope again. And yes, it's terrifying. Because you've been hurt, you've been disappointed, you've watched people walk away, you've had doors slammed in your face when you were already on your knees. So it makes sense that you're cautious. It makes sense that your trust in life is shaky at best. But here's the soul-level truth. You don't have to trust life all at once. You just have to stop hiding from it. Let yourself be seen. Even if your voice shakes. Let yourself try, even if your hands are trembling. Let yourself feel, even if your heart is still raw. Because numbness isn't safety. Silence isn't peace. Avoidance isn't strength. They're just survival skills. And they serve their purpose. But now, it's time for something more. It's time to live again. Maybe not fully, not confidently, not without fear, but live anyway. Even with the scar, even with the memory, even with the part of you that still aches. Because joy is not the opposite of sorrow. It's what makes sorrow bearable. It's the reminder that even after the worst happens, there is still light. There is still beauty. There is still you. And maybe today your only act of resistance is this. You get up, you take a deep breath, and you whisper, I'm not done yet, because you're not. You are still becoming, still rising, still choosing life one tender, trembling step at a time. A woman I once coached said this to me through tears. I want to want joy again, but I'm scared it won't last. And I get that. Joy is risky, it's vulnerable, it means we're open to loss. But here's the thing. We either feel the full spectrum of life or we numb the whole thing. You can't selectively numb emotions. If you block pain, you block wonder too. If you numb fear, you lose your ability to feel awe. So how do we break free? Not with perfection, not with a 10-step plan. We break free the moment we stop asking, how do I feel better? And start asking, what small act of courage can I take today that says, I still believe in life? Maybe it's brushing your hair. Maybe it's going outside. Maybe it's saying, I'm not okay to someone who deserves to hear it. Whatever it is, let it be messy, let it be real, let it be yours. Because the truth is, you were never meant to live in the waiting room of your own life. Sadness is a visitor, but you are home.